Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're calling from. Welcome to this month's Enrichment Series webinar. I'm your host, Amir Ganad, and I'm here with Sara Mathew, who is yet another accomplished P&G alum. Today's webinar is about leadership lessons from the trenches, where Sara is going to share with us practical insights from her extensive experience as a leader. Now, before I introduce Sara, I'd like to go over a few announcements and we'll get right into it. Let's see. So our webinars, this is a monthly series with the goal of connecting members and providing enriching content to our alums around the world. Our goal is for you to leave today's webinar having learned something new and hopefully feeling inspired. Our webinars are also recorded so that you can go back and review anything that you want to listen to or share with your friends via our P&G Alumni Network YouTube channel. Now, this particular episode is only going to be available for 3 weeks. So if you want to go back and watch this episode again, please do it by the end of August. Let me tell you a little bit about who we are. Basically, P&G Alumni Network is about a greater mission of this is a nonprofit founded by former Procter Gamble employees to share ideas, talents, and resources with each other, our communities, and philanthropy efforts. There's a lot going on in this community. It's very exciting. We have more than 35,000 registered members in 45 plus chapters worldwide. The P&G Alumni is officially recognized and supported by P&G. And we connect via global conferences, local chapters, industry events, and online content. And our nonprofit foundation supports economic empowerment initiatives in communities around the world. The global conference is coming up. It is going to be held on October 24th through 26th in Madrid, Spain. The last conference was held in Cincinnati in October of 2017 and was a huge success. It was attended by alums from all over the world and with inspiring and thought-provoking speakers and breakout sessions and workshops. So we hope to see you at the next conference this coming October to be held at the Intercontinental Hotel in Madrid. You can find more information about the registration for this event on the network's website at pngalums.com. And if you're registered to receive P&G Alumni Network newsletters and emails, information will be forthcoming about registration. Go ahead and get into today's webinar. I'd like to introduce Sara Mathew. She's retired as chair and CEO of Dun & Bradstreet from a data company to basically she retired from Dun & Bradstreet to an innovative digital enterprise introducing data as a service at big data and analytics to drive value in the marketplace. Ms. Mathew was named to Financial Times 50 Women at the Top in 2013, top value creator in the S&P 500 by Chief Executive Magazine in 2014, NACD's Directorship 100 list in 2015, FWA's Woman of the Year in 2017, and Ascend and Deloitte's Pan-Asian Director of the Year in 2018. And no doubt more of these awards are coming as she's accomplished quite a bit. Prior to Dun & Bradstreet, Ms. Mathew spent 18 years at P&G. She currently chairs the board of Freddie Mac and also serves on the boards of Campbell Soup, RB, and State Street. So welcome, Sara, and thank you so much for taking this time to share your wisdom and your insights with us.
Thank you, Amir, for that very generous introduction. I don't know, am I more Procter or am I more Gamble? I was always called a Proctoid, like probably many of you. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me. Hopefully, Amir, you can see my slides?
Yes.
All right. So good morning. Real pleasure to be with you today. And topic for today's leadership is a subject I'm passionate about, and so I thought I'd bring the subject to life by sharing a story with you about a good friend. Now, this man was a leader in every sense of the word. He was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company who also happened to be an avid balloonist. Now, this man, for some reason, I hope that slide change can be seen.
Sure.
Wonderful.
Yes. Mhm.
So this man, who was determined to push his skills to the limit, decided that he would fly solo, much against the advice of his friends. Now, he had a clear destination. He was going to get from his home in Sacramento to a specific vineyard in Napa Valley. He developed a detailed plan, carefully thinking about every possible downside scenario, picked a sunny day, and then began his journey. Now, that journey didn't go quite as he had expected. So, for example, about an hour into the flight, he dropped his iPhone as he was trying to film the beautiful countryside. And then 6 hours later, buffeted by strong winds, he realized he was completely, thoroughly, and totally lost. All he could see below was a never-ending forest and acres of green. Now, worried he was running out of fuel and concerned about the looming darkness, he lowered altitude and he started scanning the horizon for any sign of life. And then suddenly in the distance, he sees a wide open field, and on that field is a path, and there is a woman on that path. So he quickly navigates his balloon towards the woman, and then once he's within earshot, he calls out to her and says, "Ma'am, can you tell me where I am?" The young woman looks up at him and says, "You, sir, are in a green hot air balloon hovering about 20 feet above the ground." And the CEO was irate. "Young lady," he said, "you must be a middle manager in a dead-end job." The woman looked up and was surprised. "Yeah, how did you know?" she said. The CEO looked at her with some contempt and said, "Look, everything you've told me is factually correct, but it's not particularly useful." The young woman looked up to the CEO and said, "You, sir, must be a CEO." Now it was the CEO's turn to be surprised. He said, "Yes, how do you know?" The young woman looked up at him and said, "You don't know where you are. You don't know where you're going. You're in exactly the same position when you found me, and now it's my fault?" Well, that's just a disclaimer for today's presentation. Beware of CEOs. Don't listen to a word of what they say. But on a more serious note, I want to discuss this framework: destination, path, and journey. Because in many ways, it's a story of my life. And I think it's a great way of thinking about yours. Know your destination. It's not where are you going, where do you want to go? Be outcome-oriented with very clear time regulators. Path. Develop the path. How are you going to get there? What are the specific actions you need to take? Once again, be metric-oriented and time-bound. Master the journey. How do you cope with what actually happens along the way? In my experience, the best laid plans will always fail at times. How will you choose to respond? Well, this is where leadership makes a difference. You reflect and learn. You adjust and you repeat. And most important, you manage your emotions as you tackle disappointment, failure, and all the wrinkles that life throws your way. You stay anchored on that destination and firmly rooted in the belief that you can and will get there even if the path has to change. It is this reflection that I believe is the toughest part, and when I look back on my career, it is this introspection that prepared me for that next destination, the new path, and the subsequent journey, and that circle goes on and on. But first, let me tell you a bit about myself. I was born and educated in India to a family of doctors. For me, college was a blur of fun, freedom, and being a woman in India, and if anybody in the audience is a woman, you understand this, my job was to mark time for marriage. You know, I had a destination. I was going to be a kept woman. The path was also clear. I would marry somebody rich, and that would enable a lifestyle of leisure. But that journey, just like others, was quite different from my plan. You see, marriage brought me to the U.S., and in a very short time I realized that if I wanted the basic, and I mean basic comforts of life, I had to work. So my destination evolved. I now wanted a job, any job. Now my path to find this job was to scour the newspapers. You see, it was the 80s, no internet, no LinkedIn, and my job search worked the old-fashioned way. And the journey was not easy. You see, I quickly realized that if I wanted to get a good job, you need an American degree, which of course I didn't have. However, after months of relentless pursuit and so many rejections I cannot count them, Procter & Gamble hires me. I was ecstatic. Well, until I got home. My husband took one look at that weekly paycheck and asked me why I had accepted a job as a clerk. You know, I was so naive. I didn't quite understand the difference between being a manager and being a clerk at P&G. But in a week, I realized I had made a big mistake. You see, Procter hires from the best business schools across the country. If you start as a clerk, you retire a clerk. But with no American degree and no work experience, they weren't willing to give me much more. Now, deep down, I thought I deserved more. I had a master's degree from India. So I just set a new destination to become a manager. And the path was to not just beat every expectation of me, but to just blow it away. But that journey was still so difficult because there were so many naysayers who told me nobody moves up the P&G ladder if you start as a clerk. I chose not to believe them and stayed doggedly focused on my destination. And to make a long story short, in 2.5 years, I was ahead of everyone who started in management. By this time, I got my MBA at night, and this gave me that American stamp that I so desperately needed. Now, today, when I think back of those crazy 18-hour days between a full-time job and full-time school, I never questioned my ability to do both and do them well. But most important, I realized the power of staying anchored on your destination and believing you can and will get there. Destination, path, journey, and reflection. It's really that simple, and it's never too late to start. Now, this became apparent yet again after 18 years at Procter & Gamble. My career was flourishing. I was on my 17th assignment in Singapore as CFO of ASEAN. My destination had evolved so many times, and now I had a very ambitious goal. I would become the CFO of a publicly traded company by the time I turned 45. I was a top-rated vice president reporting to the CFO. And then, on that very day that I was told about the bright future ahead and the potential that I had to become P&G CFO, I decided to quit. Yes, quit. You see, I was 44 years old. My boss was just 5 years older than I. I thought he would work till he was 70, and I knew I would retire long before I turned 60. I realized that while my destination was on track, it would not occur within my planned time frame. And it was this commitment to my destination that made me leave P&G to join D&B as their CFO in 2001. Reflecting back, that would prove to be one of the best decisions of my life. Which brings me to the next chapter of my journey, Dun & Bradstreet. Once again, my destination was clear. I would be the best CFO ever, and the path consistently exceed any and all expectations. But that journey was actually quite unexpected. Like the time we had a sales decline a few months after I joined the company. While I was chatting with the sales leader, I learned that he believed that the decline was due to a change in accounting instituted by my new finance team. Now, I had put them in place to get things right at D&B. The flaw in my thinking was that while I was preventing new errors, I had assumed everything older was correct. Was it possible we had errors in accounting that had been in place for many years? We had to find out, so we conducted a review and found many errors, enough to know that I was looking at a possible restatement of our books. I remember informing our CEO of what we had found. I remember the alarm on his face, like the Enron restatement, he asked. You see, it was 2002, and Enron was just about in the news all the time. And I remember saying, yes, like Enron, I don't think there's fraud, but we're going to have to find out. He sat down, put his head in his hands, and said, what are we going to do? And I remember thinking, heck, I don't know. I've never done this before. I don't even have a CPA. And then instincts kicked in. I committed to a destination. We would get it done in 6 weeks before our next earnings release. He asked if this was even possible, to which I said, anything is possible. Now, looking back, I knew I had the right destination, but there was no clear path. I had no idea how long it would take, and whether I was even capable of the task. But I had made a commitment, and now I was moving forward to develop the plan with my team. I remember experiencing severe discomfort and real fear. You see, I lacked visibility into the magnitude of the restatement. I knew if it was large, we would get a very negative reaction from Wall Street. So I wanted it to be small and inconsequential. This was hard. You see, most of my life I had focused on reaching new destinations, decide where you want to go, and then figure out the path to get there. But this time it was different. I could not plan the ultimate destination. I had to lead with integrity first, regardless of whether or not I got there. It was a grueling experience and one that I learned so much from. The accounting was wrong and had been wrong for over 10 years. There was no fraud, and ultimately, we restated our books and communicated a sizable adjustment to investors in 6 weeks, but most importantly, without any loss of confidence. Destination, path, and journey. But in this case, my journey was only beginning. So let me share that with you. So just as a bit of context, restating D&B's books in 6 weeks put me on the map. The fastest it had ever been done before was over a year. So as you can imagine, I received accolades, awards, the board was ecstatic, and I was on a proverbial high. That is until my employee survey results came in. My results were close to last place. My organization was sending me a message about how I got that restatement done. Those long hours and unyielding focus had taken its toll, and now I was back in the CEO's office, and he was not happy. I remember that conversation. "You are not leading well, Sara," he said, to which I responded with all the arrogance of a CFO flush with success. "You need to make a choice," I told him. "What do you want, great results or happy people?" He looked me square in the eye and said, "Sara, great leaders do both." Simple words, profound meaning. It forced me to pause, take a look at who I am, how I get things done, and the impact I can inadvertently have in my urgency to deliver. So let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm pretty good strategically, a natural problem solver who gets things done. But I am a terrible listener. I am direct to the point of being blunt. I am tough, demanding, and I play to win. If you're on the other side of that table, it can be an intimidating experience. By re-examining how I got that restatement done, I was forced to focus on my areas of opportunity, and that focus paid off. In 2 years, my employee scores were world-class. Now, this experience taught me a valuable lesson about leadership and greatly improved my understanding of this very complex and somewhat esoteric subject. Now, to me, leadership begins with clarity of purpose. Purpose, to be part of something greater than you. Every one of us strives to lead purpose-driven lives, and it is this purpose that galvanizes a leader and inspires a team. But beyond leadership, beyond purpose, leadership has so much more. I think of it in terms of 3 components: values, competencies, and attributes. Let me touch on each. At the foundation of great leadership are values, like integrity, respect for others, performance excellence, and teamwork. Values to me are sacrosanct and can never be compromised. And without values, you do not have that foundation to be a good leader. Then come the competencies. I call them the 5 E's. I picked them up at P&G, and I think there was no better place for me to develop these competencies than right here at Procter Gamble. I think of the competencies as first, envision, which is the ability to develop a vision, chart a course, and set direction. Execution, to convert that vision into a crisp plan that is easy to execute, monitor, and track. Energize, to galvanize the organization and have the team excited about this vision. Empower, this is what is really hard for me, to learn to let go and trust others to lead. And finally, edge, that inimitable quality that ensures you never ever give up, especially when the chips are down. But the final and most critical component of leadership are attributes. Now, these are attitudinal, so they are very difficult to sustain. Attribute includes qualities like courage, risk-taking, decisiveness, mental toughness, humility, and caring. But ultimately, if you think about it, Each of us leverages some combination of values, competencies, and attributes to do what we believe is right. But to the observer, all that they can see are the results you produce. But more importantly, what they remember are the behaviors you exhibit. So to me, at its core, this is why I believe leadership is about behavior. And to become a better leader, you need to go beyond determining the destination, developing the path, and making most of the journey. You need to pause, take stock of the situation and your personal leadership behavior. You reflect, you learn, and you adjust. Let me give you another example. While I was a CFO at D&B, the Italian government doubled the price of the information they sell to us, creating a sizable gap in our guidance for the year. Now, like all good companies, we hired the top consultants to solve this problem, and at the very last minute, the CEO asked me to join the meeting in Milan. Once we reached Milan, I spent 4 hours listening to McKinsey drone on about the markets, the competition, the banks, the Italian government, with no solution in sight. Now, in my view, it is the responsibility of the leader to frame the problem and then develop options to address it. But no one seemed to want to step up to the plate. So after staring at that beautiful Gothic cathedral outside my window, I decided to step up. I framed the issue as a ticking time bomb that had to be diffused. I laid out 4 possible options: sell the business, raise prices 100%, restructure to lower cost, or just shut it down and exit the market. I said we need to evaluate all 4 options in parallel so we could be quick about the decision. What followed was an uproar. Local management said you could not raise prices. It had failed miserably a year ago. And very quickly, every option was shut down because it was not possible, too risky, or just impractical. And then it was 2 o'clock and it was time to go home. And on the flight home from Milan, the CEO asked me if I would run Italy directly. I was both elated and anxious. Could I lead a team that seemed so paralyzed and incapable of execution? Were they even capable of delivering? It took me a moment to realize that this was not about the team's ability to execute, but rather my ability to lead them effectively. So I worked with the market leader to develop the plan. 3 options were eliminated, and we executed a 100% price increase in the market in 2 days. Now, it's easy to talk about this in retrospect, but it was a hair-raising week as we navigated the customer response. But ultimately, the team got 100% acceptance, and Italy became the most profitable market in international. So profitable that the Italian government decided to enter. That was when we decided to sell the market. This, however, was one of those pivotal events that moved me from being just a CFO to a potential CEO candidate. Now, beyond the obvious operational experience, I learned so much more. I learned that motivation, possibility, thinking as you stretch to achieve destinations are all closely connected, but very complex to navigate. You see, we are like icebergs, like this slide over here. Only 10% is observable. The rest is concealed. What people can see are the results you produce and the behaviors we exhibit. But what actually drives us is deep below the surface. How we feel determines what we think, and ultimately this causes us to act in certain ways. Now, the role of the leader is to extract the best thinking from the team, and to do that well, you need to skillfully navigate that complex iceberg of emotions that we never talk about but is ever present in all of our lives, both personal and professional. So let me illustrate with a simple example. You are caught in a bad traffic jam and you're going to be late for an important meeting. It's a board meeting. You are the presenter and you left home with plenty of time to spare, but it is a parking lot up there. And as you sit in the car, increasingly frustrated that this is happening due to no fault of yours, out of the corner of your eye, you see a car hightailing it down the freeway on the shoulder. Now, as he passes you, there is a barrier ahead, so he ducks in front of you and nicks your brand new car. What happens next? Do you feel the heat rising? That's your feeling at work. And what are you thinking? Jerk, jackass, something unmentionable? That's your thinking at work. And then you act. Up comes a finger, a fist. In very extreme cases, they call this road rage. But now, let me try and shift your perspective. You get out of the car, and there you find it is a father trying to take his desperately ill child to the hospital. In fact, you can see the child writhing in the back seat. Note how that shifted your emotions and your thinking. Who's the jerk now? You see, the bottom line is life creates events you cannot control. What matters is how you choose to respond, and this requires you to manage your emotions, stay focused on the destination and the path to get there. And as I said earlier, this is why I believe leadership is about behavior. And to become a better leader, you need to open yourself up to feedback. Yes, harsh, critical feedback, and make a personal commitment to improve. What I'd like to do next is to connect this framework to my experience as chairman and CEO of D&B. So in 2009, I was told I was going to become the CEO of D&B. But the company I had grown to love had serious issues. The global financial crisis had taken its toll. We had gaps in our value proposition, and the business was in decline. I found myself questioning my commitment to the company. You see, I didn't see a bright future for the company and therefore for me. My destination to become a CEO had been rendered meaningless. Looking back, I would describe that period as my darkest hour. I wanted to run away to a better future, a different one. I wanted to start over. I'm ashamed to admit I even lined up another job. Were it not for a mentor and close friend who called me out as the quitter I was, I probably would have left and missed out on the greatest leadership experience in my lifetime, being the CEO at D&B. So I decided to stay and began to search for a new destination. The path to success was fuzzy and fraught with risk, but the more time I spent reflecting, the more excited I got. I started to take responsibility for the situation we were in, and I found myself becoming deeply committed to fix it. I went from ideas to destination to a passionate obsession to restore D&B to its former glory. I dreamed of a nimble, innovative company that consistently delights customers, one where our insights and analytics were pervasive in the marketplace. My destination was clear. We would transform the business, and I dived headfirst into nascent technologies and the opportunities and threats they posed to the business. I quickly realized technology was not a conduit to lower cost, but a capability that could help us transform. And from these learnings, I began to develop the path forward with my team. I found myself digging into our history. I don't know if you knew this, but did you know that D&B was probably the first ever social network? Take a look at this. These are D&B reports from the 19th century. Now, they weren't digital, but that's a tweet if I ever saw one. And the more I delved into our history, the more responsible I felt for this great franchise and the potential ahead. You see, D&B is an amazing company. 4 presidents have worked there, including, yes, Abraham Lincoln, and then Grant, Cleveland, and McKinley. And if you didn't know this, there are only 25 companies in the U.S. that are as old as D&B. Yes, P&G is on that list as well. You can see from this slide. And all these companies have one common element. They repeatedly transform themselves to stay relevant. If we had done this for 175 years, we could do it again. I had found my purpose as CEO. Now, the path forward was treacherous, but it offered immense possibilities for growth. I decided we would re-platform our business from end to end so we could drive new value for our customers. When the former CIO called me and told me she thought I was crazy, I probably should have listened. But I decided to push ahead, and I committed to a very large technology investment and began our journey. Yes, I knew it was risky, but once I had made my choice, fear no longer held me captive. I was going to stay and fight. Now, I would be untruthful if I said this journey was easy. It was not. There were moments of deep, dark despair. Like December 2011, when I began to hear rumblings in the system, things were not going well. And then early in 2012, I realized that despite my best efforts, a massive technology project was completely off track and failing miserably. Now, what followed was the toughest year of my career. I had to take accountability for that failure and communicate it externally to investors and internally to my team. I remember it like it was yesterday. I stood in front of my team and apologized for letting them down as their CEO, even as I recommitted to get us back on track. This was not the time to place blame. You see, as a CEO, you own it when things go wrong. Now, the external announcement was a complete disaster. Take a look at this chart. That's our stock. Our stock dropped by 15% that day, and by the end of the week, every analyst had a hold on our stock. We soon hit a 52-week low of $56, and as is usually the case, when a stock drops by 20% or more, negative sentiment began to build about the company. The shorts started piling in, and by early 2012, D&B was one of the top 10 most shorted stocks in the S&P 500. And as if that wasn't enough, it culminated in an activist shareholder taking a 7% ownership stake in the company with a long list of demands. Top of that list, that I be stripped of my chair title so I could focus on running the company as the CEO. Well, actually, there was a whole lot more. In the interest of time, I'll spare you the gory detail. But when I think back of that time, I'm often reminded of that saying, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. Now, as painful as this was, wrestling with this massive failure helped me grow immensely as a leader. Most surprising was the way my team responded to my apology. I received hundreds of emails from all levels of the organization with personal commitments of support. It strengthened my resolve and my determination to get things back on track. So first, I made sweeping changes on my management team, and then invested behind two key strategic bets: data as a service to allow our data to reside in the cloud and become native in cloud-based applications. We inked a 7-year deal with Mark Benioff of Salesforce.com to put D&B inside, and concurrently doubled our investment in data so we could dramatically improve our value proposition for the largest banks. And then we pulled the last available lever, financial leverage. We initiated a levered share buyback to repurchase 1/3 of our market cap in the open market through a share repurchase, the largest in our history by a very long stretch. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering, how did this end? In a nutshell, quite well. I guess I wouldn't be up here talking about it if it didn't. Those strategic bets paid off, and we returned to modest growth in 2013. And our stock? Well, like I said, the bets paid off. Our stock doubled in value by the end of 2013, reaching an all-time high of $120. And get this, CEO Magazine put D&B atop of the list of value creators on the S&P 500. Ironically, when they called me for an interview, I refused. And let me explain in more detail why. Because it's important to glean one final lesson from this accolade, and my reflections here are sincere. Now, I'm going to preface my comments by saying it's always better to be on top of a list as opposed to the bottom of a list like this. But the lesson from this accolade is profound. A year ago, I could have never topped this list. So my reflection, be careful of attribution. You see, we're all wired to attribute good results, awards, and accolades to ourselves, our genius, our unique capabilities, our leadership. And when things don't go well, we are quick to blame others: the economy, somebody on our team, the environment, or something outside our control. Be careful of this behavior. The reality may just be quite different. In my case, maybe I just got the right base period. So after 35 years of working in corporate America, I have come full circle, back to my roots, my values, and my beliefs. I would characterize my career as having 3 phases. The first 5 years of complete naivete, followed by 25 years of blinding ambition, and then the last 5 to 7 years of introspection, learning, and real leadership growth. I realize I'm human and I'm imperfect, and I'm comfortable just the way I am. I realize how little I really know and how much I still have to learn. So today I can say I've graduated from the School of Management only to become a student in the College of Leadership. I believe leadership is a journey, one that never ends. It begins with clarity on the destination. It requires that we forge a path, and it is an ongoing commitment to master the journey with all its ups and downs. You reflect on your behavior. You make adjustments. You sometimes even choose a new path, but you always continue to press forward. It's also not about what you accomplish, but how you get it done. In the words of Gandhi, to become the change you want to see in the world versus just imposing your change on everyone else. It's also the simple stuff like saying sorry and thank you, forgiving someone who did you wrong, and wherever possible, helping somebody who perhaps has a need. And you never, ever give up, especially when the going is tough. Destination, path, journey. Reflect and repeat. If I could do this, every one of you can. Make leadership your new destination. Develop the path to become a better leader. Reflect, learn, and enjoy the ride. I can promise you, you will be better for it. I want to close by saying thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I welcome your feedback as always. I do believe feedback is such an important part of who I am and what I value in life. And at this point in time, I look forward to your questions. So, Amir, I think you kind of take it over from me at this point. I'm not sure how I do that.
Yes, yeah, sure. No, we'll leave your slide up here, and then I'll go into some announcements after we talk about take some questions. But thank you so much, Sarah. I mean, this is so insightful, and if I think of myself in earlier parts of my career, I would have never imagined that someone as accomplished as yourself is going to talk to us about self-awareness and reflection and taking responsibility. I thought, wow, these people are go-getters and just ambition and make it happen. But obviously, you've been through those stages. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. So at this point, I would really encourage the attendees to send us your questions. If there's anything you want to ask Sarah, we're going to go ahead and have this conversation. But as the questions are coming in, I've got a couple of questions myself. There is kind of a misconception out there that someone as accomplished as yourself has had it's just kind of had a smooth ride. Things just kind of worked out for you. But it's real clear to me that you had to take responsibility, and those were really, really tough situations. And what enabled you to do that was the whole clarity of your destination. Now, if somebody is not really clear on their destination, what would you say? What's an exercise or an approach that they can take, Sarah, to establish that purpose and destination? What advice would you give them?
I give you two pieces of advice. Don't try and decide an ultimate destination. It's too far away. So if you had asked me when I joined P&G, did I want to be a CFO or a CEO, I probably did not know what the word CFO and CEO meant. I mean, I kind of knew what CEO meant because I guess you would have the annual shareholders meeting in the Coliseum. I remember that. That's when I even knew there was a CEO. And all I knew is it's a very important person that you never saw. So try and get a destination that is more near term. Where do you want to go and be time bound in the next 1 year? And then as you get comfortable meeting those destinations every year, then start to think about 3 and 5. That's what I did. So, when I started out, and my first time I had a destination was I want to become a manager. Why? Because usually most people who start out as a clerk at P&G never become managers, right? That was tangible. It was measurable. It was time bound. I was going to get there as faster. I actually blew away my own time record. When I was told I was being promoted, I about fell out of my chair. So that's what I would do. But you have to get clarity. If you are not clear, and it is not, and when I say clear, what, when, that's the destination. You have to be metric oriented and time bound. There's a danger otherwise. See, when I wanted to become CFO, eventually I said I want to be a CFO of a publicly traded company. The hard decision was knowing it wouldn't happen on the time frame I wanted. And then it's back to you and what you want to do. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. I think it's it's okay to have an iterative process. You got to get clear on what's right in front of you and where you want to go, and then just continue to evolve, it sounds like. And we've got a comment that's come in. It says, thank you for your transparent sharing, very helpful. So what is your current destination, and what are you learning as you do board work?
Okay. Actually, my current destination is to eat my way around the top 50 restaurants around the world and enjoy time with my husband because we were literally
Okay.
fasting through the night. So that is a very important part of my destination. In terms of boards, the role of a board is very different from being a CEO. Your role is governance and oversight.
Mm-hmm.
Where I really like to add value is with the CEO, especially when things aren't going well. Because the reality is the board is the CEO's boss. And I cannot tell you how many times I coach to CEOs privately on the side. I cannot tell you how many times I've watched a complete disconnect between the CEO and the board. And to me, it's always apparent that the disconnect is starting, but mostly to a CEO, it's not, because sometimes boards are not clear enough. So on boards, I try to really push transparency with the CEO. If the CEO is not performing, you need to tell them that. You also
Mm.
need to tell them, look, if you don't turn this around in the next 18 months, because oftentimes I think, and this is why I say this is all the emotional side, nobody wants to offend anyone else.
Mm.
Actually, when you are really honest with somebody, you do them a much greater service than when you BS them that everything's fine. So as a board member, I catch people off on the side and, the CEO on the side and say, look, this is not looking good. Then a whole series of questions. What are you thinking? Sometimes the CEO says, well, it's an execution challenge. That's a red flag for me. If you've got bad performance for 18 months, that's not an execution challenge. How do you know it's not a strategic issue? You can waste time by thinking it's all about execution. If it's execution, it has to be fixed between 6 to 12 months, 12 at the outset. So, the process I try to use in terms of that as a board member is, how do I make the CEO successful? And that's through candid conversation. And on one board, the CEO used to end up, and I was not the chair of the board. When you're the chair, you get lots of calls, but the CEO would literally call me twice a week sometimes. Every time he had a bad conversation with the chair, he would call me. And so I would tell him, look, I said, us having this conversation is not good because I feel I need to tell the chair because that's a lack of integrity. I'm having a conversation with you. You need to go back to the chair and say this.
Mm.
This was a deeply concerning issue because they are getting in the weeds and running your company for you, and you don't think that's appropriate. Otherwise, I'm going to have to tell them, you call me, and you don't want to do that. You want to get to them first before I tell them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like having those courageous conversations is
That's
really, really
important.
important. And it seems that if you have a clear destination, you have that commitment and take your responsibility, then you're more likely to have those. Now we have
Yeah,
another, yeah,
yeah.
please go
Go
ahead.
ahead. You
Yeah,
have to have those are crucial conversations. So
yes.
the times that as a board member I felt I could have done better is when I delayed those conversations. And that to this day I carry it with me as something I could have done better.
Mhm. Understood. So we have another question, Sarah. This question is, what was your path to finding strength and support in the lowest or loneliest leadership moments?
Oh, that's such a great question. First, I call it who are the people in my corner?
Hmm.
And I'm going to start by saying my family. I have an amazing husband who actually is probably the best sounding board anybody could hope to have as a CEO. So he runs his own strategy consulting firm, and he is just besides being my husband and all the support you get from that, he's also a great sounding board. The reality is having conversations, the really difficult conversations, need to be with people you totally trust. And I have a very short list of people I completely trust.
Hmm.
The second thing I did as CEO is I hired somebody to actually be my mentor. And, it was a paid position, and I did it but by the way, we had a great relationship. We were really good friends. He cared about me deeply. He had been a CEO, a chair CEO. He had walked, wasn't what I would call just an executive coach. This was somebody who had walked in my shoes. He never told me what to do. But what he always did is how are you feeling? And I remember telling him, good Lord, I cannot believe I screwed up so badly.
Mm.
He said, okay, with the pity party, so what are you going to do? That's right. That's exactly what I needed. A pity party does no good. And, and then I started thinking, well, and so I said, well, maybe we should do this. Maybe we could do a very large share repurchase, but, how do we get the board across the goal line? And so where he was able to help me was really help me manage my board, which I would say as a CEO is the single most important thing you have to learn to do is to manage your board. And it's not managing your board because they are your boss. It is essentially developing a relationship with your board of complete trust, honesty, and transparency. So he was the one who told me, you are going to call every board member once a week. And I said, what am I going to tell them? I have nothing. Well, you better figure it out. Doing that resulted, I am still very good friends with my D&B board. Still am in touch with every one of them. Why? Because that's what lasting friendships are all about. Just earlier this week, I had dinner with 4 former board members of Campbell Soup. Why? Mm-hmm. Because these are relationships you build. And often in our career, we think about, and these are not staged, meaning I didn't kind of try and do it with any objective other than to develop a relationship with no strings attached. I don't expect anything out of them. And I think that I've been enormously helpful. So I was never lonely, given what I had at home. Somebody I had who was a phenomenal coach, friend, mentor, who also called me out as a quitter when I told him I'm going to leave. I had a great new job. And he said, so you're going to quit. That's interesting. I never saw you as a quitter. Well, that makes you think, doesn't it?
Yes.
That's the kind of person you need. And I would say start with people you trust. It's very hard to develop this relationship from scratch, but there are people you feel you can talk to. You'll be surprised that people do want to help, and if they understand you and your personal situation, they will help you. And by the way, that's how you expand your thinking. That's how you find the path. I have never found a path alone. There was always a team. The team is what makes everything possible. Those are the shoulders on which you stand. But when you want counsel and guidance, it needs to be outside the team. That's just my experience. Doesn't mean it's right.
No, I think it's really great perspective. I think oftentimes as leaders, when we know that we can sort of help others and coach others, that sometimes we don't need to coach ourselves. But what I'm hearing from you is, look, we need to surround ourselves by people who care about us, who are willing to be honest with us, and that sort of thing. So that's really great.
Yeah, everybody needs a coach. Serena Williams has a coach. Tiger Woods has a coach. Simone Biles has a coach. I can go on and on of all the top performing people.
Very cool. Absolutely. So, Sarah, I'm going to address one more question, and we're going to close it here. But the question is, what work-life challenges did you face? I mean, obviously, with a very supportive husband, and you alluded to this, but what did you face work-life challenges, and how did you deal with those?
Oh, heck yes. All I can tell you is, especially as a mother, so I have 2 sons, and they've grown up to be wonderful young men. Honestly, there were days when I used to wonder whose children are these, but that's all part of their growing up and finding themselves. But they are 2 amazing young men. I'm so proud of them. But early on, so when I had my first kid, I was the first woman who took 6 months off in P&G. Nobody had done that before. And then again, a year with my second son. By the way, it didn't hurt my career at all. Contrary to popular belief, people say, your career would be impacted. In fact, I was even advised not to take 6 months off because it would view like I, wasn't as committed. So I would say take the time off you need and then make sure you get the right help. So the way it worked for us in my early years, So, I was like, call it around the time I was a senior financial analyst was when I had my first son through associate director. When I was a senior analyst, 100% of my after-tax salary went for the nanny, and I had a backup nanny, okay, because back then there was no other way you could work other than being at work. And I'm hoping today that CEOs are more understanding that you can work from anywhere. Look at us. Here we are around the world having a conversation. If I was expected to go into Cincinnati to do this 1 hour thing, it'd be crazy, right? So I think a lot has changed. But
Yes.
make sure you have help. So my husband and I had this kind of rule. Everything inside the house I hired out, and that included the nanny, and everything outside the house he hired out, and we were responsible for holding up that end of the bargain. We did argue about the garage. I thought it was outside the house because, nobody sleeps there. He said it's so we had those, questions around, but he did take care of the cars as well. But that's how we made it possible. Because if you are not at peace with your children being well taken care of, for me, it would have been very hard to work. So the result was other trade-offs, right? So we didn't take any great vacations. We didn't do the kinds of things that maybe a lot of other people did because that was just a choice we made. I was happy with the choice. But balance, if you were to ask me, I would say is unique. It's different for everybody. So this worked for me. You have to really do some soul searching around what does balance mean. Do you need more time? If you want to stay home with your children, I would encourage you to do that. There is no more important job, no better job than being with your children, and they need role models. They need that. So it's really about what is it that you want. I think sometimes I work to get away from my kids. I don't know. And by the way, my parents were doctors. They were never home. I was raised by nannies and never had a problem leaving my child with someone else.
Thank you so much again, Sara, for sharing your perspective with us. This has been so valuable, and we have a few more questions here, and I would imagine that folks may have some questions for you, and they may engage with you and provide some feedback. But I really appreciate your time here today. I'm going to make a few closing announcements, and then we'll close the webinar. Basically, these webinars, again, are recorded, and this one is going to be available for through the end of August. We would encourage you to get involved. Would love for you to sign up for updates at pngalums.com, support the foundation, pngalums.com/foundation, and partner with us. There are a variety of ways where you can do that: volunteer, start a chapter, join a chapter, and things like that. And you can always contact us by sending an email to hello@pngalums.com. Now, our next webinar is scheduled for September 10th. It is we're going to have Kevin Ashton with us, the inventor of the Internet of Things. So he's going to talk about the Internet of Things and the future of computing. So we hope that you can join us. Again, this is Amir Ganad, your host, and I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar, and I wish you a great week and much success and fulfillment going forward. Thank you.